President Trump, it's first of all an honor to address you, but thank you very much for watching this video. As I'm sure you know, in most of the United States at this point, there is a terrible conflict that is currently going on in Yemen, which has caused the deaths of thousands of innocent civilians. Most importantly, there have been, the risk of famine is the worst that it has been in over 100 years according to the United Nations. Over half of the population is currently living off of the help of humanitarian aid, and this has been a huge burden for the country. In addition, it is also important to mention the cholera outbreaks that have happened. This is the largest cholera outbreak in modern history. Thousands have died already, and thousands more are projected to die in the near future. But in order to understand this very complicated issue and conflict, it is first important to understand the history, which requires us to step back over 1,000 years.
Back in the 7th century, when the Prophet Muhammad was preaching Islam for the first time, he told his followers that if they were ever in imminent danger, they should go to Yemen. He said this because of the geography of Yemen. Yemen is a very mountainous country with a lot of caves and no rivers at all. This means it's very, very difficult to traverse and thus very easy to hide in. Because of the geography, there have been many groups that have been geographically isolated. In the north are Zaydi Muslim tribes. These Zaydi Muslims practice Shia Islam, meaning that religious leaders of Islam have to come from direct descendants of Muhammad. In the south, there are Sunni Muslims that do not believe this. Yemen is found on the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula and is bordered by Saudi Arabia and Oman. Because of its integral position on the southern tip, the ports have often been of great influence. In the 1500s, the Ottoman Empire took over Yemen, but they failed to control most parts of it, and there were regular rebellions. It was very difficult to control the region because of its mountainous nature. In the early 19th century, the Ottomans ended up leaving and then returning because they failed to control it, but then they saw the strategic value of the nation, so they came back. Even then, they failed to control it very well. Also, the British ended up taking the port of Aden in the mid-19th century, 19th century, because they had opened the Suez Canal in Egypt and wanted a port in between the East and the Mediterranean Sea. The British ended up leaving in 1967, but prior to this, there was a monarchy which was overthrown in the north that was composed of Zaydi Muslims. They had their own monarchy in the north, but after this, they felt that they lost all of their power, and this started a deep resentment between the north and the south. In 1979, there's the Islamic Revolution in Iran, which overthrew the Sunni rulers in favor of Shia Muslims. This was seen by Saudi Arabia and the U.S. as a threat, and Saudi Arabia specifically viewed it as Shia Muslims attacking Sunnis, and this made them weary of other Shias in the region, such as the Zaydi Muslims of Yemen. Also in 1979, North and South Yemen united. Prior to this, they had been separate entities, but they both saw a common need for finding oil along their border, so they united. In the 1990s, Shia Zaydis in the north formed a school in Sana'a, the capital, that educated and radicalized several youth, including Hussein al-Houthi, in the Zaydi Muslim religion. Also around the same time, Osama bin Laden was forced to flee to the Sudan and began expanding the influence of al-Qaeda.
In around 2000, there was an attack on a U.S. naval warship right outside, off the coast of Yemen. This got the U.S.'s attention, of course, and this terrorist attack was done by and perpetrated by al-Qaeda, which has growing presence in the region at this time. This got the U.S.'s attention, as I mentioned earlier, and in 2002, the U.S. started launching drones and missiles from these drones and attacking the al-Qaeda presence all over Yemen. In 2004, we see the founder of the Houthis, Hussein al-Houthi, is killed in an attack between the Yemeni military and the Houthis in the northern tribal areas. This, of course, greatly intensified the animosity that existed between these two groups. Prior to that, the Yemeni military really viewed the Houthis as more of a pest than anything else, not as much of a threat. But as we see in 2005, there are continuing clashes, and the Yemeni military launches a formal assault against the Houthis. In In 2011, we see the Arab Spring, which is particularly important. The Yemeni citizens all across the country are looking forward to potentially having a new ruler, as there is much unrest in the country and they wish to have a new kingdom. So Salah steps down in 2012, and President Hadi becomes the new president. In 2014, there's a constitutional referendum which fails, and this only serves to further divide the country. Also during this time, you see the increasing presence of Houthis. The Houthis, around 2014, they launch a military assault into the south, where they attack and are able to take hold of the capital, as well as many port cities, as we see, like Aden. Eventually, they're able to do that. Also, at around this time, 2013, Iran and the Houthis become allies. They both believe in a very similar version of Islam, and consequently, Iran, if you will, the big brother, is more willing to supply arms and funds, which the Houthis then used in their military conquest in the south. This is of great concern to Saudi Arabia, as we mentioned, Saudi Arabia and Iran have two very different views of Islam, and Saudi Arabia views this threat right at their border as a massive threat, which could hurt the country. We actually see the Houthis launch ballistic missiles into the Saudi Arabian capital during this time, and in 2015. And in 2015, Saudi Arabia launches a formal military assault and coalition onto the Houthis. This coalition is comprised of Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, and uses arms that have been purchased by the United States, from the United States rather, to attack the Houthis. However, many of these missiles, United States created missiles, have killed numerous civilians, as we saw in one New York Times article. A school bus was hit, which killed around 40 students and teachers. And of course, this is terrible publicity for the United States.
Now we reach the current state of the conflict. At the moment, there are four competing groups. There are the Houthis in the north, there's the original Yemeni government and the Saudi coalition in the south, and there's also a new group, which is the Southern Council, which is a secessionist movement in the south supported by UAE, which has broken off from the coalition. In addition, there's Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and ISIS, which are both competing forces in the east, which is a very sparsely populated region. Right now, there's much conflict going on, and there are many atrocities being committed on both sides. The Houthis, as Salah Al-Ahmad told us, a reporter from Frontline, the Houthis have cut off media support, have cut off any negative press, and they also have tortured many people and assassinated political opponents. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, has been somewhat reckless in how they use drone strikes, and they've attacked many civilian targets.
It is also important to note with the United States' involvement during this time. So in 2016, the U.S. made a $110 billion arms deal under Jared Kushner to Saudi Arabia. More recently, however, which the world has seen with the Khashoggi case, this brought much attention to the Yemeni conflict and has served to shed light on some of the various issues that are impacting it.
Mr. Trump, thank you so much for watching our video. I know you're so busy, and we really thank you. Yemen is truly an important issue. The UN calls it the worst humanitarian crisis ever, and half of the people are in risk of starvation. This is a horrible conflict, and I know that with bright minds like yourself, we can solve this conflict, and we can end the atrocities being committed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, President Trump.